I don't want to be doing this. I can't be doing this. I don't want to have to tell my supervisor about this. I don't want to have to tell the guys in Bible study when purity comes up that I'm also struggling. So it was just a lifestyle of shame.
Hey, welcome to the show. Here I have with me Bennett from Josh McDowell Ministries. Ben, it's good to see you, man.
Hey, Drew, thanks for having me on the show. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Ben and I have written similar resources for Christian men to find freedom from porn. And this comes from our own stories. And today I am super excited for everyone watching and listening to hear your story. Ben, how long have you been free from porn?
I've been free from porn for about 6.5 years now. Yeah,
Woo!
porn and masturbation as well.
That's fantastic.
So it's been an interesting road for sure. But it's awesome being free and living free from it.
Yeah. And I know your story incorporates not just sexuality, but also emotional health and mental health. And I want to hear all about that. Ben, what was it like? What was life like before you experienced that freedom?
Sometimes it's hard, honestly, to think back because it's been so long, and the things that that used to trigger me don't anymore. Or now walking in freedom, it's almost like I have a new brain. It's just been so long. So things that used to trigger me, things that used to be tempting, the thought processes I used to have. So I have to really think back on it. Um, but I remember being so full of shame. I not only felt shame because of my own behavior and what I was doing and being involved in ministry, leading in ministry. I was in a college ministry, leading Bible studies, doing evangelism, all of that. Started working for Cru, the campus ministry of Cru, still struggling with all of that. So it was like I kept making all these promises to God that I would stop. I, at one point, was able to shame myself into stopping. And I think that's what kept me free, quote unquote, because I wasn't really free
Yeah.
for months at a time. But just the shame of, I don't want to be doing this. I can't be doing this. I don't want to have to tell my supervisor about this. I don't want to have to tell the guys in Bible study when purity comes up that I'm also struggling. So it was just a lifestyle of shame, but also feeling shame about who I was. I didn't really like myself as a result of, just growing up and feeling like the black sheep in my family, not feeling like I fit in there, in the friend group, um, being into different music than other people were into, um, being bullied, uh, just being picked on again and again and again, being a little bit overweight, also taking my faith seriously in high school. I mean, just being bullied for that. So there was this sense of shame about my identity. And then that was furthered by the behavior that I was caught up in with pornography. Um, but it was exhausting. That would probably be the word that I would use.
Yeah.
Exhausting, the amount of mental space that it took up, just between the shame and worrying about the next time I would fall and worrying about all the temptation. And it was all consuming and exhausting and just a huge burden. And in addition to that, I just felt so much isolation and distance from God. Not that he had turned away, but when I had doubts about his character because of pornography, or doubts about his power to set me free, or when I turned away because from him because of pornography and felt so much shame, it was like I struggled to be close to him. The same thing was true with my friends, my guy friends, my female friends. I felt so bad about myself in this behavior that I couldn't. Uh, well, to be known and to be loved, I would need to share everything. But whenever I would go back to porn, I'm going to wait. I would always wait a couple days till the shame started to dissipate before I would open up. Um, but those days were a miserable existence. It was normally 2 or 3 days after a relapse of just, I'm sleeping in. I'm not really talking to anybody. I'm running from God. I'm just trying to survive till the shame goes away. And that's not what I was created to experience.
Amen. Yeah, man, you painted such a miserable picture. That was one of the most depressing pictures I've heard, but it's so accurate.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes from Charles Spurgeon says, "The most miserable man on earth is the half-committed Christian."
Mm,
Just miserable. He's just enough into God to be miserable in the world. He's just enough in the world to be miserable in God.
mm,
And I feel like that experience of just downright misery is what you were talking about. And one of the things that really strikes me is how even recovery can be miserable
yeah.
when we do it because we're ashamed of our behavior and we try harder and we white knuckle it, and it's so stressful it can feel like a different prison cell, like we're going
Yeah.
from one prison cell to another.
Throughout that time, it was like my addiction switched. My addiction from pornography and binging switched to an addiction to religion and purging,
Wow.
and just being obsessed with the holiness of God, or the just going all in on the purge and getting rid of all sexual thoughts and all sexual talk and pornography. And then I became addicted, almost, I would say, or at least I was finding identity in the performance, like a Pharisee, like the amount of time I was free from porn, and then comparing my story to others, and then started early on in recovery, which would have been 9 years ago, I think, or 8 years ago. Um, the first couple of years, I was still binge purging, and I started leading accountability groups or guys through certain resources. And that's really when the shame came in that motivated me to stay, to abstain. But like I said, I started becoming obsessed with sobriety, and really counting the days. Not that that's a bad thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I felt good about myself, and that was just another way of compensating for shame, compensating for the fact that I didn't feel good enough or like who I was. So I swung the opposite way, and
Yeah.
that was miserable too. And I think it took a couple years before I started to not really care. Like, I don't care how long I've been free. I don't care who knows that I'm free. I just care about living healthy and walking intimately with Jesus and others and helping people. And that took a while. And, I've been free for 6.5 years, but it was probably only in the past 3 years or so that I started to think, how how absurd is it that anybody that I would boast or take pride, which is really just compensating for shame, I think, that I would put identity in how long I've abstained from sin. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah.
And, just throughout recovery, learning more and more about how good God is and how gracious He is, and experiencing Him as a loving Father. um, I finally would say I've kind of, it's like the pendulum swinged, like full on addicted to legalism and abstaining, and now in the middle, where it's, yeah, I'm free and I'm not going back, but
Yeah.
I'm not obsessed with abstaining. I'm not walking around thinking about all the times that I'm going to be triggered or tempted. Why? Because it's been so long. Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What we know about neuroplasticity, the neurons that fire apart wire apart after so long of not being triggered by certain things, not going back. It's like I have a new brain, a new lifestyle, one of health and of enjoyment of God and others throughout my daily life.
Yeah.
Um, so
That is the opposite of misery. I mean, that is
yeah,
joy and flourishing and exactly what we were created for. And that description of going from addicted to addicted,
yeah.
man, that is so powerful. I feel like I've never heard anyone put it that way before.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, but it's true. And what I hear you talking about is not just freedom from the behavior of porn
right.
and masturbation, but freedom from the battle,
Hmm.
from the constant stress, from the feeling the need to control my sexuality and shut it down. It sounds like you found ways to express pleasure in your body and intimacy with others
Yeah.
in healthy ways, even though to my knowledge, you're not married.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does that work?
Single, not married. And as I've been thinking about throughout the years and doing research and writing on this stuff, and I think early on, yeah, so I wrote a resource called Living Free with Dr. Ted Roberts of Pure Desire and a guy named Brett Butcher for single guys. You mentioned that both you and I, it was cool a couple of years ago when we met, like
Mhm.
we were the only two guys that I know of in the world who had written anything that was holistic on the topic of finding freedom from pornography. That was like a recovery program. But when I wrote that, I think there was, if I think back on the language, there was some of this battle language or of fighting sin. But the more I've studied it and looked at the scriptures, I'm not convinced that we're supposed to fight sin, but we're supposed to flee sin. How can we fight sin if Jesus has already defeated it and dealt with it? Now we just walk victoriously in the path that he has provided. And so for these unhealthy choices, he's provided healthy choices. In the research I've done, I found, obviously pornography releases a huge amount of dopamine. Well, and a lot of times we go to it when we feel rejected, we feel disconnected, we feel lonely. Well, it also releases dopamine and oxytocin, this bonding agent in your brain, healthy relationships, being connected. So when I feel rejected, when I feel lonely, if I call, one of my close brothers, one of my close friends, and I reach out and process the emotions and the pain of life that I'm going through, I'm going to get the same thing that pornography promises, but in a much healthier, satisfying, sustainable
Yes.
way.
Yes, and it is sustainable because when your dopamine receptors get flooded, it actually shrinks your capacity to experience pleasure.
Mm,
And by going through the channels we were designed to go through, meaning connection with God and other real people, it actually increases our receptors. So
mhm.
so by getting more pleasure, we actually in the end get less.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're willing to settle for maybe less of an overwhelming experience by having a real person to talk to and to bring my emotional pain and my trauma to, like, in the end, you're going to be more joyful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I think early on in my recovery, and I think so many people think this way, that when you're giving up pornography or giving up sin, that you're actually giving something up. No, God is providing a better replacement that's going to be more sustainable. And but we just don't know that. And thinking about what is it? James 1, the cycle of sin. When desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin leads to death. If you think about what is that desire actually about, when I'm tempted to go to pornography, it's not just some random lust or because I'm just way too horny or because, my sinful nature. There's actually a God given desire behind that. And something is triggering it. Is it you feel rejected and you want acceptance? Is it you feel lonely and you want connection? Is it you shared your opinion and somebody didn't affirm your feelings? What is the desire there that's being conceived? And then there's an option in that moment. Either I give birth to sin, I go down this pathway of coping, of surviving the chaos of this world, or I go down the pathway of responding and getting the needs met, my needs met in a healthy way that God has designed, because God cares about us. He cares about our desires, our needs, and he's not a prude. He's not trying to hold out. He's not trying to hold out on
Yeah.
us. Like, I know, he's trying to provide us something so much better and satisfying.
Mhm. Absolutely, man. And gosh, you and I have experienced that.
Hmm.
There are some guys listening who are like, I've never experienced that, you know?
Mm,
And it's hard. It's hard to trust that that's true
yeah.
when you're stuck.
So hard. Hmm.
Yeah. So, one of the best ways that we've found in order to get those needs met, get those needs met,
The old tongue twister.
yeah, is to find those brothers, those allies
Hmm.
who we can depend on. Ben, who is an ally who has played that role in your life?
I've had lots in the journey, um, throughout the years, and some have come and gone. They've been there for a season, or a couple years. Uh, it's really hard when you think about, okay, this has been an 8-year journey for me, and it would have been ideal that the first 3 guys that I was in group with, um, were still a daily part of my life. But that's not just the reality. So what I've had to commit to is, this is my lifestyle until the day I die. Um, and that's the way I was designed to live. I will never live a life with secrets anymore. I just can't. I need to be fully known and fully loved, not just to stay sober, but because that's what I was created to experience. That's God's design. And it's so satisfying. And I'm not going to give the enemy any playground or any amount of playroom for those things that I haven't confessed or shared with others, um, to shame me. I'm going to share everything. So now I have a guy, his name is Alvin, and we talk about once a week and text one another throughout the week, about everything. And oftentimes, because, we're not relapsing, it's just about life. It's about our emotions. It's about the stressors. It's about all the precursors that in the past would lead up to a relapse. But now we have other unhealthy ways of coping. Like, hey, bro, hard week. I'm really tempted to go eat a bunch of Taco Bell, you
Yeah.
know, or I'm just getting really anxious and angry about the situation, and I'm responding that way, and I'm getting exhausted. Just supporting one another throughout the week. But I will say, early on, the first, and the reason why now I feel comfortable having one guy, um, is because of the journey the past 8 years. What I encourage other guys to do, and girls, and especially in the early years until you experience lasting sobriety, I encourage people to have 3, maybe 4 people that they're daily talking to, um, because especially as that new lifestyle is developed, these people are pointing out your patterns, your blind spots. They're helping you understand how your family of origin or past trauma or difficult unmet needs or difficult experiences may be playing out now in the present, and that will save you years to identify those patterns early on, because those are coming out each week in the triggers and in the temptation and what's setting you up to go back to porn. So I had that for about the first 5 years, and I did about 4 years of 4 years of group work where I was doing 30 minutes of homework 5 days a week, a weekly 2-hour meeting, morning and night meditations, phone calls, texts throughout the week. 4 years. In addition to that, hundreds of hours of therapy and of trauma therapy. Um, so
That's a
it's
lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot in depending on your level of the issues you've struggled with. Like for me, it's been a lot of mental health stuff as well, and trauma, and um what else? Food addiction and all of that. So um
Yeah.
but I would say early on, I wouldn't have wanted somebody to tell me that, you know?
Mm.
And I didn't need to know that because I committed to 1 year of recovery, of group work, of therapy. And it was just so cool because it was holistic. It was so cool to see. And that was with Dr. Ted Roberts. That guy saved my life. It was so
And
cool to
many
see.
others.
Yeah. Um, so cool to see how much I grew with the Lord and with others that year, and how much I learned about Jesus. I mean, to me, it was like very, very intense discipleship. So I loved it so much. I grew so much. What seemed like a burden going in, oh my gosh, I'm in this group going through this stuff about porn, knowing I have a problem. It became a joy because I learned so much more about thriving in health and started to taste and see and experience it. And then by the end of the year, it was like, I'm not going back. I'm going to continue doing more group work, doing more therapy, doing more. Um, it was just so cool to see that switch that
Yeah.
happened.
And that's what you were talking about with neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
Just like it becomes easier and easier to go back to porn the more we use it, it becomes easier and easier to choose health and relationships and self-care the more we practice it.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times I talk about this, like, imagine if you've been walking on your feet for however long you've been walking, 18 years, if you're a college student, 19, 20. Um, and then what if that was the norm? That's how you, every day, that's what you did. That's how you lived. Then all of a sudden you had to learn to start walking on your hands, and how difficult that would be the first day, the first week, the first month or two. But at some point, it becomes your default way of thinking. You would wake up in the morning, get out of bed, and just end up, oh my gosh, I'm on my arms, I'm on my hands, I'm walking. And then the more and more you do that throughout the months, throughout the years, you grow and your arms become strengthened, and you unlearn probably how to walk on your feet, and it's easy and natural to walk on your hands. And that's kind of what it's like, I would say, moving from unhealth to health.
And
um
this is a ray of hope for so many of us who feel like, okay, I'm doing the work, I'm going into my past, I'm going into my childhood, I'm meeting with a coach or a counselor, and it's so hard right now.
yeah,
Like, if what you're saying is true, there will eventually come a point that it becomes almost automatic.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, it's so easy to focus on the future. I mean, even now, and here's what's crazy, okay? 6.5 years sober, but still my default is, well, this part of my life still isn't healthy, or that part, or, it's so much, I think it's easy, and was easy for me when I was heavily addicted, to think, once I get free from porn, everything's going to be better. And don't get me wrong, a lot will be better, but the voice of shame, the inner critic that's always inside of you, trying to improve you, so that you will finally be acceptable to people, that's where a lot of the focus needs to be as well. Being okay with where you're at in the journey, learning to love and accept yourself by seeing who God says you are, and who other people say you are, and what's biblically true of you, being made in the image of God, being God's son, adopted into his family, learning to to drill that into your head on your good days, on your bad days. I'm convinced that so much of this journey is about unlearning what the world and pain has said we are and relearning who God says we are. Um, because like I did for years, we can put our identity in our performance or abstaining from porn. But then another thing's going to come along. Oh, I'm not skinny enough. Oh, I don't have a good enough degree. Oh, I don't have this many followers on Instagram
Mm.
in ministry being a speaker. Oh, I don't have that much money. Oh, I don't have the car that person. And that is still the addictive shame narrative, the inner critic saying, once you are a little bit better, you will finally be acceptable. But we've got to call that out and realize it in our lives and learn to accept who God says we are regardless of our performance.
Absolutely. Ben, how do we find joy on this journey?
Yeah, I think so many times we can think that it's all about the destination. It's like, okay, I'll get this coach, I'll join this group, I'll have a accountability partner, I'll do this until I find freedom from porn. And it's good to have goals. It's good to focus on getting free. But what I've learned in my recovery and the past 8 years is so much of the joy is in the journey. We need to have goals and we need to focus on the destination, but don't miss, as they say, the forest for the trees. Don't miss what the daily joy it is to live into this new pattern. I think back on my first couple of groups and how many healing moments there were. I still think back on moments of people sharing things that they've never shared and feeling so loved and accepted, of the relationships that were formed, of the relationships I have to this day, of the moments along the journey where I heard exactly what I needed to hear in that moment that healed a past experience that I had had. So to take it one day at a time and see this as um, a journey, like, okay, today, God, don't let me miss out. I remember one time praying that consistently. Don't let me miss out on what you have for me today. I don't want to be so focused on next year or the next 5 years or where I'm at that I miss how you're going to show up and do something amazing today. Um, and those are the experiences we need to remember and hold on to. Um, and so much of recovery, of healing, is about today and learning to be present and learning to accept who God says you are today, despite your performance. And that's going to go a long way, because when you get free from porn, um, there's going to, like I've said, there's going to be other things, or maybe when you get married and there's something that your wife says to you that makes you feel rejected, rather than being super reactive. If you've learned to enjoy the journey and to be present in the moment and accept who God says you are despite your behavior, then in those moments it's going to carry over and you're going to be able to respond rather than getting angry and it turning into a big argument. That's just one example, but there's so many examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about learning how to be present. That's something that I'm still learning all the time, especially carrying my smartphone around.
Yeah.
Um, and Ben,
Me too.
yeah, we're both doing a lot of social media right now. I mean, how do you be present in the middle of using social media for ministry?
Yeah, it's such a challenge. And especially because it seems justifiable. Like, okay, this post in writing this,
Mm.
and I know relatively how many people are going to see this, and I think it's going to go over really well. And this is this could be what God uses today to really motivate somebody to get help or to stay on the journey they're on. So I think balancing that with, and it's true in ministry in general. It's like there's all this opportunity, but a yes means a no to something else.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? And before social media, it was like traveling all over. There's all these opportunities, and people in ministry struggle with this. Like, should I go on that trip? But it's my kid's birthday, and but it's this opportunity, and it will impact these many lives. So just having the rhythms of throughout the day, trying to be present where I'm at and still learning that. But one thing I did a couple years ago, which was awesome, was I decided to start keeping my phone on do not disturb 24/7.
Wow.
And I know some people say with my job, I can't do that. I'm like, maybe you can, maybe you feel like you can't, but you might be able to. But keeping my phone on 24/7 and only checking it when I consciously choose to, rather than being addicted to the notifications.
Yeah.
And I knew I knew this lifestyle had taken root and people were respecting it when Josh McDowell said, "Ben, I've realized I have to call you twice in order to get it to go through, because it's on do not disturb. So the first time it gets cut or it doesn't come through, the second time it rings." So that's just become a lifestyle. A second one is I keep all the notifications for emails, for apps, the badges off, because otherwise, and that's what they're creating these apps to do, to get you addicted to them, and you get a surge of dopamine. So
That's what we were talking about earlier.
yeah, so it's so freeing to say, I'm going to check this because I want to, not because I'm being notified and badgered by a phone to do so. So that's really helped a lot.
Yeah. And I asked that question selfishly for me, because that's a
Yeah.
growth
What do
edge
you do?
that I'm pushing into. And I'm actually going to do a little experiment and try that out and see who gets mad at me and if it's worth it. So I'll let you know how that goes. A huge part of this journey is turning our digital devices into part of the solution, not just part of the problem. And I love how one way you can do that is by following Ben V. Bennett on Instagram. Ben, how else can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, Ben V. Bennett on Instagram. I have a Facebook page, which is Ben V. Bennett 2. I'mLivingFree.com is my website. It has a bunch of articles and more about my story on there. And then on josh.org, josh.org/Ben. I got some videos up there, blog posts, all of that. So.
Yeah. And I've been enjoying your content, and I think people watching and listening will get a lot out of it too. So thanks for coming, man. Final question. What is your favorite part about being free from porn?
It's probably just the satisfaction I have in life now. A lot of times I like to use the word thriving. I feel like I went from surviving to thriving. Not every day. I mean, there's still mental health struggles. There's still the inner critic coming up. There's still discouragement, but there's been such a shift to now focusing on, wow, today is a gift. Life is a gift. I'm happy and satisfied with my friendships, with my deep connection with God. I feel like I have new eyes to live and to give to other people in my life. And now using my story, or seeing God use my story to help other people find freedom and healing from pornography, from hurt, from different struggles that they get caught in. It's such a joy.
It is so satisfying, and it's satisfying to talk with you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. And
so much dopamine and oxytocin for us.
Yeah. Going through the good pathways to get there.
Yes, good pathways. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's been a joy.
Yeah, it is. And for everybody out there, always remember, you are God's beloved son. In you, he is well pleased.